Awesome. Wonderful. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for gathering today. I am communications manager. I think I know all of you fairly well, but I'm excited to introduce you to Point Blue's very first science illustration intern, Maya Amix. We'll do a little bit more of an in-depth introduction in just a second. A little bit of background. This is a very exciting manifestation of the energy and passion that we've been dedicating to grow art and science collaboration at Point Blue. So there were 18 applicants for this position. So that really spoke to the excitement and desire for this sort of position out there. And it was just with a base level of recruitment. We didn't do much more than we usually do for job advertisements. So that was really encouraging. And Maya rose to the top due to her multidisciplinary background and passions, her impressive portfolio, and her shining references. So she's between her 4th and 5th year of an undergraduate landscape architecture program at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She's pursuing this major as a means to revive damaged natural environments and create equitable green space for everyone. And she's further exploring these topics with minors in sustainable environments and restoration ecology. So really great mix of studies and passions on her end. And so for this internship, it's an 8-week experience. It was funded by the Maxwell Hanrahan Foundation. And the goal is to provide an early career scientific illustrator with meaningful knowledge, skills, and hands-on experiences in conservation science that can really make a difference in their career. We also hope that Maya will provide perspective that can help Point Blue engage people in new ways through merging art and science together. And I am personally very excited for the gift of funding and the synergy of excitement from Point Blue staff and the funder and our new intern on exploring the power of merging art and science for greater, more inclusive and beneficial conservation impact. I'm also honored to be Maya's Point Blue guide and facilitator through this 8-week journey, and very grateful for the support and collaboration from many of you in this gathering, in this internship. So today, Maya is going to be sharing her draft project ideas, and she would love your feedback to help refine this initial plan. So before I pass the mic over to her, I'll encourage all of you to sort of jot down your questions and comments as we go along. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Maya.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Liska. I would like to thank you again after that amazing introduction. Thank you for all of your support these last 2 weeks and just getting me started at Point Blue. And I would also like to thank everyone out there who it sounded like worked really hard to get this grant and this internship started. I'm very thankful for being able to be here and to be the first person to kind of experience this internship. And I've had a lot of fun so far. Just these last 2 weeks, I've been really excited to shadow with a bunch of different teams at Point Blue. So I got to spend a day with the soils team and a day at the marine lab. Visited Palomarin to watch the bird banding a couple weeks ago, and visited the Novato Baylands, and just met with a lot of other teams along the way. And so it's been very fun and very informative to meet all of these experts and everyone coming from very different backgrounds to kind of share their passion at Point Blue. So I'm feeling very thankful to be a part of this. And I will now share my screens and kind of take you through the project, where it's at. Okay. You should be seeing the title page for the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to present 2 ideas for illustration projects that I would like to tackle over the next 6 weeks. And I'm very excited to hear any ideas or comments or questions that you have at the end of this. And I'm excited to hear from such a large group because I know everyone will have different perspectives on how to make this better or how to engage with people better, how to incorporate art styles, or how to incorporate science into this project. So I'm open to any ideas by the end. But let's dive into it. So both of these projects I'm looking at through this lens of multiple benefit conservation. And I'm sure a lot of you at Point Blue have kind of worked with this framework already, or have even written professional papers about it. And I appreciate those papers. They helped me learn about the framework. So this framework has been defined as conservation efforts that are designed to simultaneously benefit local communities of people, while also enhancing ecological function and improving habitat quality for fish and wildlife all at the same time. So I see this as a very helpful strategy for kind of selling conservation projects to people outside of the discipline, for convincing them that we aren't just restoring this for one specific species, but we're restoring it to help a bunch of species out there to improve functions overall, and to help people as well who are tied up with these ecosystems. So this is the lens that I'm kind of approaching these two projects through. So the primary project that I will be focusing on is illustrating forest management benefits at Palomarin. And I'm estimating that this project will take up about 70% of my time over the summer. And the remaining 30% I am excited to put towards visualizing sea level rise adaptations for stakeholder workshops. So we'll dive into these projects and kind of see what type of styles are out there that I'm thinking of, what examples I found so far, and kind of the people and process that we're looking at. So first off, a little bit about Palomarin. So a brief background about the issues that we're facing here is that human disturbances have plagued the Point Reyes area for more than a century. And these kind of disturbances include lack of grazing, fire suppression, and invasive species, along many other, a host of other issues. And so because of these disturbances, there's been habitat change and changing vegetation species. And these are also causing changes in the animal populations, which the field station there has been recording with over 60 years, no, almost 60 years, I think, of data taking. So these illustrations would be part of a larger plan of forest management that they're hoping will increase the biodiversity and improve habitat mosaic around Palomarin. So the goals of this project would be to firstly communicate the history of human disturbance on habitat and populations at Palomarin, and secondly to discuss the multiple benefits of forest management. So in addition to that, I'm throwing in a little possible goal that could be up to the team as we discuss this project a bit more, but possibly to conduct outreach to the Bolinas community during the scope of the illustration process to test out how the messages are coming across. And this could be as small as talking to some visitors to the Palomarin station who are there to watch the banding and showing them some of the work so far and saying, how does this make you think? Or what kind of questions does this bring up? Or it could be as extensive as getting a table at an event in town and talking to people there. So that is a topic for further discussion about how this project might work. So some intended outcomes from those goals is that forest management at the Palomarin Field Station would receive the necessary support from its stakeholders. And another outcome would be that the illustrated materials might inspire future adoption of forest management practices elsewhere. So I think that this includes both internal outcomes that are important to Palomarin and Point Blue, but also external. Where can these illustrations go beyond this project, and who else can they connect to out there? So I'm really interested in this project specifically because of the potential to reach out to communities and the potential for all these people that could kind of benefit from the work. But also because I have an interest in these landscape scale changes. Lishka mentioned that I'm currently studying landscape architecture, which has introduced me to a lot of different topics in classes. So classes in soil science and classes in fire science, landscape ecology, and many other different classes that are helping me kind of see landscapes as all of these interconnected systems. So I'm really interested in how humans are changing those systems and how we can mitigate those changes. And another personal interest is that I'm very interested in forest management specifically because my family actually owns a small property, about 40 acres near Georgetown, California. And this forest has become really, really overgrown and really dense in the last few decades. And so we don't know much about this topic, just as, cousins, uncles, and aunts, and we want to learn more. So this is actually my dad and I blazing trails across our property because we don't really know what's out there, and we want to kind of take better care of our forest. So this is an important topic to me, and I'm really excited to work and learn from all the experts at Palomarin. All right, so that was kind of the why about this project. Why am I pursuing this project? Let's talk a little bit more about how this project is going to happen. So the audience at the Palomarin field station and for forest management overall will mainly be the Bolinas community and other local partners because they will have a big say in how exactly is management going to happen and what kind of support will they get. Other audience will be funders who will also be able to make the project happen. And then Palomarin visitors who down the road might be wondering what kind of management is happening here. So after talking with the team, a primary format that they said they have of interest is illustrations that could be used in PowerPoints or presentations so that it can be given in person or virtually to different user groups. But the illustrations don't have to stop there. They can be reformatted in the future to be in different forms. So it could be brochures, it could be a post on the website, or even could be used on site somewhere as educational signage. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering what is actually going to be illustrated. So I think that this topic is really important for using storytelling in. And that's because we're telling the story of Point Reyes from how it's been managed in the past and how that's causing issues now in the present, and how that might cause things happening in the future, and how can we change that. So it's an issue of telling a story that appeals to the audience. And we can do that through illustration mixed with choice evidence and maybe incorporating some characters in there. Could be fun. The story by the end of it will basically present multiple benefits of forest management, including how it will create habitat mosaic, improve biodiversity, mitigate the risk of megafires. It could reintroduce cultural burning if that's a connection that the team wants to explore. And overall, just encourage more healthy forest among a host of other benefits. I have a lot to learn there. So on the right side, you'll see some very rough drafts of what this could look like. So these are some diagrams that show maybe how we show interactions between species and different habitats. And for instance, how fire might change depending on different management strategies. So this is just a very rough idea about different diagrams that we could explore. And these were taken from inspiration from some examples that I found online. So, right, there we go. So these are two examples of also story-based scientific illustrations that were both digitally drawn by different artists. So this one on the left has the artist illustrated a scientific paper about how forest management impacted and benefited the ecosystems. And this one on the right was actually involved in a news article as part of The Guardian about the history and impact of eucalyptus in California. So both really interesting projects and really interesting incorporation of illustration with evidence and with like primary source interviews. So that's a really interesting style that I would like to explore. And looking at these two also brings up the topic of art styles, which can be a big impact on how the audience views the topic and the credibility that comes with the topic. So here are a few examples of different art styles and what they can bring to a project. So watercolor styles can be very smooth, can be traditional, but can also be reimagined to be more diagrammatic or a bit more modern. A cartoon style, I think that the two examples I just shown might fit into cartoon style. It can be much more accessible and easily digestible to a really wide audience. So people of different ages and people who have more or less scientific background. Down at the bottom, another option is digital rendering. So this can be much more realistic. And I think that it has greater potential for visualizing a site as it currently is or how it could be in the future. And finally, minimalism is another style that tends to lean more towards scholarly and also easily digestible. So with all of those in mind, my top 2 recommendations for talking about Palomarin and its history and storytelling would be watercolor or cartoon, or a mix of both. Because I believe that these two are very engaging, rather fun, and kind of help people from a really wide audience, as I just mentioned, to get interested in the topic. And I'm going to shift a little bit to talking about the secondary project, which is about coastal adaptations. So for that project, I believe a digital rendering style would be much more beneficial, because that project is looking much more at visualizing what these adaptations will look like. So on this next slide, a little bit more information about, oops, one slide too far. A little bit more information about the shoreline adaptation graphics. So the goal for this project is to communicate technical design elements that can be applied to outer coastal towns. So this is including Tomales Bay, Bolinas, and Doran Beach. And these graphics would be used in a September workshop, which is outreaching to this audience here. So it's a little bit different of an audience from Palomarin. This would mainly be focused on partners and planners. So this would include city planners, engineers, and partners in conservation. So the graphics would be used much more for getting everybody on the same page and getting everybody interested in what restoration could mean in these areas. Other audience members would be funders and potentially community members in a later workshop. So some example graphics for that would be these two on the right side. And these both also show a little bit of digital rendering. So the one on top does a very good job showing how species and larger natural systems are interwoven in a restoration project. And this one on the bottom shows multiple forms. This one is a bit more developed and a bit more of a designed landscape, but it does show an example of how you can show multiple options to a group of people in a workshop style and have them understand kind of a gradient from very gray shoreline adaptations to green shoreline adaptations, which is a topic they will be covering. So with all things considered, with all the Palomarin background and shoreline adaptation workshops and art styles considered, it's going to be a busy 6 weeks. So here on this last slide, I have my potential timeline for the summer. There it is. So this timeline shows different stages of the projects as I'm planning right now. So as soon as I gather feedback from this proposal, I'm really excited to jump into further research, some site visits, and starting some drafts for the Palomarin team. And I hope to complete a couple drafts of that and continue to get feedback and revisions through that process. And then at the same time, jumping into shoreline adaptations, maybe in another 2 weeks to work on that, visit some of those sites, and have some final renders done by early September. So this is very up to feedback and up to change. So this is where you all come in. I'm really excited to hear some of your ideas, comments, and questions that you have about this. So I'll end with just a thank you so much for being here and listening to this presentation. And thank you for welcoming me to the team for the summer.
Yay, you guys can unmute yourself to give Maya a round of applause. Thank you so much.
And I suppose I can stop sharing my screen maybe for discussion.
Yeah, that works well. Awesome. Excellent job, Maya. Thank you so much for such a well done presentation. I'm sure there's lots of thoughts stirring around with the group. So yeah, as we move into our feedback discussion, feel free to add your comments or questions into the chat, and I'll go ahead and keep an eye on that and read those out as they come in. Or you can use the hand raise function to say something verbally out loud. And just to reiterate some of the potentially helpful guides that I shared in the calendar invite, using what, when, where, who, and how questions can help sort of expand inquiry and curiosity about different aspects of the project. And also questions about audience goal and impact are great to drill in on. And then questions and comments, suggestions about DEI and justice, how that's built into these projects. Questions about how the project will help influence Point Blue's conservation impact. And finally, questions about how this project might support Maya's skill set and career goals. So those are just a few different guides on questions and comments as we go along. So with that, I'll open it up. And I'll look for comments in the chat. Oh, I see a hand up from Anne. Go ahead, Anne.
Maya, thank you so much. First of all, what a great presentation. You're off to a good start. So
Thank you.
welcome to the team. And I'm very excited that you are in this project, and anything I can do to help. I'm chair of the board and also an avid nature journaler. And we've just started this Conservation, Art, and Science Advisory Committee. So very excited about all of it. And one thing, I'll put it into the chat, but Robin Lee Carlson is a nature journaler and teacher who has done a lot with fire, documenting fire results and how landscapes recover from fire and how people can use fire. So like I say, I'll put that into the chat. And so she might be helpful, and she might even be willing to help you out if you're interested. But you can go to her website and see her style as well, which is kind of like what you were talking about, kind of in between that cartoon and the watercolor style.
Yeah.
And she also has, I don't know if you could get access without paying for it, but she was a presenter at the Wild Wonder Conference a couple of times and did like 1-hour workshops on how to document fire. So very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a great resource.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, Mark, and then Christy.
I beat you to it, Christy. I was thinking about the audience a little bit for obviously the thing. I'm more connected with the Palomarin part of your project. Is thinking about, so if we do want some information focused for community members, we might be highlighting more things of like how introducing fire back into this area close to the town would be beneficial, or like create kind of a safety buffer. But we might also be looking for more like graphics that just kind of illustrate what has changed and what it might look like. And it might not, I don't know how to have really a question, but just something to like think about, or others to maybe expand on. But so yeah, either like focusing on how it benefits the community versus how we just expect the kind of ecology to change in the area. Yeah.
And I think that I'll have a lot to learn from you all on the team there about how exactly you want to approach the community, what goals you do have in mind for just the whole forest management. And I would really hope to tailor the illustrations to whatever you think would be most beneficial for touching the right people. Yeah.
Cool.
Chris.
They're kind of like all goals I feel like that we have, and it's just trying to figure out what kind of fits best with the time and your interests.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'll agree and say I'm super excited you picked this project, and we are, still figuring it out ourselves and kind of trying to envision what this will look like. And so I think this will be really great to go through this with you, and think about how we're going to communicate it with Bolinas and other partners. I think I think it would be really great sooner than later if we connected you with some of the like our Park Service partners or our other folks that we've been working with who are thinking about these things also, and how, you know, how they talk about it or how they would like us to be talking about it, just so we're kind of coordinating on that front.
Totally.
But just something to think about, and fitting that in while you're here, like scheduling with them can be, you know, difficult at times. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
But I wanted to mention one thing that just occurred to me as you were showing some of the examples. I wanted to ask how you think about language and which language to use, and or any, whether you include any words at all in an illustration, as far as, you know, thinking about inclusivity and accessibility and kids who won't be able to read it or people who use other languages who won't be able to read it.
Interesting. You bring up a very good point that using language as a really central part of sharing information, I can totally see that as being as kind of being less accessible to a larger audience. So yeah, if that's kind of a goal that we want to pursue, I would be really interested in pursuing kind of using diagrams and art in a way that bridges communication without the use of language, or if some language was needed in English, or if some evidence was needed to be included, having that as kind of a minimal piece on the side that just kind of tags onto the artwork. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Definitely something to think about.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Christy. Looks like Diana's up and then Hillary.
Right. So much to say. That was really great. And it was really powerful how effective your presentation was at kind of demonstrating why these illustrations can tell the stories about these two different projects in a way that we don't currently have available to us, and how I don't know, just how influential that can be for people to see them in such a way. So I'm excited about that. And
Great.
I had a thought regarding Palo, which was just, I feel like a lot of times we try to explain, you know, what we want the landscape to look like. And so I love this idea of having a visual to go along with that. But I also had a thought about, we even have a place where we need to replace a sign that looks out over our whole landscape. And I was thinking, like, in a vision of what that landscape, what we want it to look like from a habitat perspective, could be something to consider as one of those, you know, secondary outputs of what you put together.
Yeah. And that could be a great way to really visualize the history of it as well. What did this look like? What does this look like now? And how should that change? Yeah. Very cool. Thank you, Diana. Hillary, feedback?
That kind of goes well into my question, actually, because I was kind of wondering how you manage a project that has so much history as well. Like, you kind of have to, I feel like, in your illustration, get people up to speed on the history of the space, and then also looking into the future. And I was kind of wondering what that process is like for you, and similarly, maybe like combined with that, how much in your process, how much you like to really understand the place and the biology and natural history of a place, like how important that is for you in your process while you're doing this.
Yeah, great question. Because I didn't talk about my process as much, or about how I got to this point in thinking about the projects. But within landscape architecture, it's very common for you to go through an inventory and analysis phase of a site project. So that means in your inventory, you just dive into depth into the history of the site, what's currently on site, the species that are there, the geology, the soils, the climate, the weather, and even like the direction of the wind that typically hits that site. So that's almost how I'm approaching these two projects, because that's what I've been taught in school, is to just learn as much as possible at the beginning, all the possible things that are influencing the site, and from there, summarizing the information into something that's digestible for an audience. So for example, the history of a site could be summed up into a timeline that shows kind of different events that happened along the way that brought it to where it's at now. So there's definitely a lot to explore about how to tie that into an illustration project rather than just a design and landscape-based project. So I have a lot to learn there, but I feel like I'm coming from a little bit of an understanding of how to approach it.
Awesome. Great questions. Thanks, Palo Crew, for bringing these up. And Nancy, yes.
Hi there. I remember bumping into you when we walked into the building together. I don't know if this is very pertinent, but I think it really is timely because Palo has been getting a makeover and will continue to be getting a makeover next year. And to have really cool signage the timing is just great because there's more emphasis on the field station. And then I just wanted to stress the need. Palo has a fundraising need. So a project like this that has a deliverable of a brochure, besides cool visuals that visitors can see, can be very useful for us right now. So I think it's really important in all of those areas.
Yeah, glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. I do hope that whatever form the illustrations come in, that they could be easily transformed into brochures and signage. I personally might not have time to tackle it this summer, but I hope to kind of leave the resources behind so that someone else could kind of take it over and apply it where it's needed. Yeah, but yeah, exciting to hear how much support is going into Palo right now.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, it's really important to hear from all these different aspects of Point Blue from our projects and program staff and from our fundraising staff. Yeah. Anne, and then Bennett.
Thanks. So in nature journaling, we talk about using words, pictures, and numbers. And that was a great question about what language to use and also maybe what sophistication of language. And also numbers, I'm just wondering, are you expecting to incorporate some data points that you work with the scientists to learn about and to try to convey? Or have you thought about, how important the visual, the words, and the numbers are?
Yeah, interesting to hear that that's how nature journaling is set up, but it makes a lot of sense that you need to incorporate kind of 3 different communication styles together. I'll definitely think more about to what extent can we communicate everything so that it's the most accessible to a lot of people. And maybe it is including a few data points. For instance, like I was really interested in how specific indicator bird species were either rising in numbers or falling in numbers due to habitat change. And so showing some data of that and kind of mixing it in with the illustrations could be impactful if we can figure out how to do it right. But I am totally open to kind of tips or recommendations about how to communicate everything. Yeah, I can't say that I've ever done like a whole illustration project without words. So that would be new and interesting to explore. Yeah. Very good ideas.
I have my thoughts are sort of are aligned in some way with Anne's, and one of the things I was thinking about was this idea of having it be an iterative image where there's one version of it that's just visual, and there's another image that maybe has some language up with it, and then but the same basic physical painting or pictures, and then layering on another piece that could be used in 3 different ways or in 3 different venues. The other thing that I was really interested in hearing was this idea of the idea of workshopping, and that the methodology that you would use in terms of the way you would deliver the information, and if you're going to be doing a workshop, would be different from perhaps the watercolor, which is more of a kind of a reflective and passive thing. And I was just wondered, have you done workshop stuff or with some of your other work, and what does that look like, and how does that fit in with the big picture for you?
I can't say that I've used my artwork in any other workshops with the community. A lot of my experience has been artwork for class projects and for personal artwork. So I'm really excited to apply it to this new kind of opportunity to outreach with people. And yeah, again, I'm open to any suggestions about how to make that happen. Yeah, sorry that I don't have
No, it's
more
just
to answer that
interesting.
with.
I mean, because we've done workshops with land trusts, and workshops is definitely a delivery method of Point Blues, which I think can be very powerful. So it'd be interesting to talk to some of the folks who've done workshops here in terms of, just sort of informing your thinking on it.
Yeah. And I am really excited about working with the shoreline adaptation team because they're working specifically towards a workshop in September. So I think that they will have a very clear goal about what graphics they need that can actually be blended with their workshop style as it is. So that might give me some more guidance about how workshops are typically done and might inform me a bit more about how the Palo Marin illustrations could be implemented. So yes. And I saw in the comments that Hillary was recommending the Palo Data Explorer. I think I found that online. There's multiple pages about like species that are changing and climate that's changing and vegetation that's changing. Okay. Yeah. I have seen those pages.
That is a good point.
Very
I don't know that I've shared that with you, but maybe, yeah, we will definitely add that to your resource folder, and Palo team, as Maya works with you, that's a good thing to circle back to. Yeah. Anne and then Rose.
Yeah, speaking of presentations, I don't know, when is your internship? When does it finish? What's the date?
Early September. I don't have the date off the top of my head. Do you, Lisa?
September 6th, I think it is. It's a Wednesday. So yeah, I'm planning to schedule a final presentation either that week or the week before, something like that. So I'll send out that calendar marker real soon.
Okay. And maybe Maya, if you're still interested and if we have time in our agenda, I'm just thinking it would be really fun to have you present to our board of directors, which is the following week. It's September 13th. So maybe mark that date if you think you'll still be around and engaged in some way. I mean, we'd obviously be able to do it virtually to accommodate you wherever you are, but just note that it's that afternoon of September 13th.
Great. Thank you for the invitation. I'll definitely keep it in mind.
Thanks for bringing up that date. And yeah, we can see if Maya can be a special presenter. And if not, then hopefully board members can attend that presentation that we schedule.
Yeah, and we'll see how much time we have on our agenda. We
Yeah, right. Yeah.
As all of you who have tried to present to us know, it's usually like, oh my gosh, we have 10 minutes left for you. So I apologize to all of you. We've done that too.
Thanks, Anne. Rose and then Magda.
Hey, yeah, awesome presentation, Maya. I'm super excited about this project. I am just curious. So I guess I'm hearing that like for the Palo project, the main audience is kind of like community members. Do I have that right? It's like people like visitors of the station and local community members. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I understand as well. And I think also there's a lot of partners that the station is working with in terms of forest management strategies around a larger part of Marin. I think I still have some research to do into all of that, but yeah, it would be community and local partners from what I understand.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I like understood that correctly. And then I guess, and then I've been thinking like about, and I don't know how to phrase this question because it's kind of like a question that's been ruminating. I've been having, that's why I haven't put my hand up yet, but like, so the goal or like what, I guess, like, what are you trying to persuade the community of? Like, specifically, is it the prescribed fire piece, or is it like more broadly management actions, or are we not sure yet? Like, that's something you're going to explore as you dive into the project.
Yeah. I think this is something we can discuss with a lot of the Palo staff members. My personal understanding right now is just convincing that forest management in any of its levels, whether it's prescribed burns or thinning, has multiple benefits out there. But if anyone on the Palo team wants to chime in as well about what they think, or Lishka.
Yeah, I think Palo members will have some things to add to that as we go along. But I remember a conversation that Maya and I had earlier about Maya, your learning in your class about just how you personally, you didn't know much about forest management when you took the fire or forest management class, and you felt like any tree cutting was bad.
Yeah.
So there's kind of basic things that, fire bad, cutting trees down bad. And so it's for conservation, for healthy forests, it can be more nuanced than that. And I think that would probably be a safe assumption. But I think you're right, Rose, that also that's something to discover in the research phase as well.
Totally. Yeah. Awesome. And then I had one more question, or more, I guess, just comment or something to consider as you're exploring is like, I'm curious if you've thought at all about how far back in history you're going to go as far as like how the land has been managed in the past. Like, because I did hear you mention that. And I'm just curious if you're planning to like just in the time of Point Blue, or like back into indigenous times. Culture
I can answer
management.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think for in the goal of inclusion, it's really important to acknowledge the indigenous, the historical indigenous management of the lands around there, which I don't know much about at the current time, but I know it's an important topic to research and include somehow in the final project. So I would at least like to touch onto indigenous management, briefly mention how the Spanish grazers came in and took a lot of the land for rangeland, and then how it fire suppression became a really big influence. So kind of that type of a timeline, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah. And it's a nice circle too, because it then comes back to like, hey, and now we want, because there was cultural burning, obviously, and it's like, hey, now we want to burn again. So it's like a nice
like this has been done before and it was
story.
Successful for centuries, and why don't we kind of try something like that again?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Rose. All right.
Before we go to our next question asker, I want to introduce Magda briefly. So this is very exciting that Magda is joining us today. A while ago, maybe like years ago now, it feels like, Magda randomly reached out to me. She is a graduate art student, and she was just curious about ways she could collaborate with Point Blue. And then Rose and Liz reached out and said, hey, we have a funder that wants to, fund an internship with art and science. And I was like, I have someone who's interested in collaborating. And Magda was almost our graduate level intern, but it just didn't work out scheduling wise. But Magda was super interested in still engaging with Point Blue and supporting the internship as they could. So thank you for joining us, and I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here. I'm super stoked about this project, and Maya, like, major kudos to you. You are taking on so many different, like, massively complex concepts and trying to like distill them into like visually satisfying illustrations, which like that alone really difficult to do, and then incorporating like local history is very difficult. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of like accessibility and intersectional accessibility, both inside and outside of museums, with like climate work and like making that information accessible. And I totally get what you're saying about like thinking through different art styles and which is most effective. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I would highly recommend looking into like the design of junior ranger books from like national parks, because they're designed to be like very much mass appeal, but still be like engaging both for children and for like their parents and anyone who wants to engage with it. And I think that they're a really interesting piece of like public science information that's universal design. So instead of trying to like do something that's like really common in environmental spaces of just like kind of retrofitting and like adding on accessibility at the end, or adding on diversity at the end, or something, to like have that in from the beginning, in terms of like thinking through how do you engage the most people with this. And like, I think that there's been like a really interesting discussion now about like which language to use. And I don't know if it's in the budget to be able to like translate whatever labels might be necessary into Spanish, or like into what the most common like languages are spoken in the local community. But I think that could be like an interesting thing to explore. I would also recommend maybe depending on like what the goals kind of are when you speak to more people and like think through it more, possibly even looking at comic books, because those are a really cool way of like looking at a lot of different ways of visual narratives with like really minimal words. And not necessarily like classic Spider-Man, but like if you go into a comic book store, some of like the newer wave stuff is really interesting and has really interesting ways of like using color and shading and pattern as a way to like get really complex narratives across in like only a couple images. Especially because like just going through the colonial history of forest management and like fire management and all of that stuff can be really complex. The only reason I know anything about it is because my older brother like is an arborist. And so there's still a lot of that stuff that I'm like, what is that even? Why are you setting things on fire? What are you doing? That doesn't make sense at all. But yeah, all that to say, it seems like an incredibly exciting project that you have a lot of personal connection to. And I can't wait to see how it comes out.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, those all sound like some really good tips to go and look into. Hadn't even thought about Junior Ranger books. Probably haven't seen one of those in years. And I do love going and reading comics. So I could totally take that as a professional research tool. Yeah, and it sounds like you've done a lot more thinking into communications, accessibility in graphics, and interesting to hear about you working on climate graphics in museums. So if you're okay with it, I would really love to kind of keep in touch over the summer and kind of keep getting your feedback on how I'm deciding to do things. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Well, good.
Awesome. Great questions. And I responded to your question in the chat, Bennett, but really good question. I did provide Maya with the example of Life Below Ground, which is an art and science product created by a couple of folks at Point Blue and Partnership Orgs. Branded style visual for our external facing communication. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that.
Oh, what I mean by that is this idea that what the sort of style or styles that we decide on become a visual branded way of our doing art and science stuff moving forward. In other words, are we looking to define a branded visual communication style?
My immediate response would be no, because I'd want to leave space for different styles happening. But in terms of a brand recognition with the information that goes out, I think it could still be in a container of like a logo or a color scheme for like a background, but the art graphics itself, I mean, right now I'd say no, but if for some
something to
reason
think
gets
about
excited about that, then
as we develop it.
I don't know,
silo
but we'd
of
need to
communication.
hire Maya on full time to be the graphic designer then.
Yeah, right. That's where I'm going.
Is that where
I'm going?
Okay. Sure, yeah, let's find funding for that if that's the direction that we want to
Maybe wait and see the final deliverable first before you offer me a full-time job.
All that phase 2.
Phase 2, yes. Yeah, in-house graphic designer would be wonderful. Sweet. Okay, well, thank you so much for your very thoughtful questions. I think this was very stimulating for the beginning of the project. Maya and I will be working together to sort of finalize the working project outline, and I'm sure it will change over time slightly, but this has been really helpful to just kick us off. So really appreciate your time and your feedback. And yeah, especially our outside of Point Blue guest, Magda. Thank you so much again for joining. Amazing to have you here. And Maya, any last words before we close out?
Just thank you all for spending some time to be here, and thank you for bringing all your perspectives in and really giving me some things to think about for the next few weeks. I look forward to talking more with Paolo Marin and hope to keep in touch with Magda. But if any of you have anything else that comes up and you see something and you're like, oh, I should go and send that to Maya, then feel free to shoot me an email. Yeah.
Lishka, do you want to save the chat that captures all the links? that you put-
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm taking notes, so I'll copy what you added in there and other people into the note stock. So thank you. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Thank you
Maya.
all.
Bye.
Have a good one.